Thank you. That's a great summary. All right, so now we're gonna dig into the details. So Kate, we're gonna start with immigration. So you want to kind of give us a general picture on how the EB-5 investment itself works from an immigration perspective, and what are the kind of key things investors need to be aware of as they start to explore doing an EB-5 investment themselves?
Sure. So EB-5 had a number of changes last year with the passage of the RIA, which is the Reform and Integrity Act. It implemented a number of changes in EB-5 law that impact investors, and of course, the price went up, which was, the first price adjustment since the program was initially introduced in 1990. So it was an adjustment for inflation, and this is the investment amount that you can see on the screen for the next 5 years. The general investment amount is $1,050,000. However, most projects are at an $800,000 investment amount, and that is determined if a project is located in either a high unemployment area, defined as 150% of the national average, and in EB-5 talk, we call that a targeted employment area, or a TEA. It can also apply to a project that is a government infrastructure project, or a rural project, which is defined by the US Census and which can be looked up fairly easily, as those designations are for 10 years. When an EB-5 investor is choosing whether or not to move forward with the application, key things for them to consider are, from their side, can they show and document the source of their funds? So the US Immigration Agency and US public policy is, of course, very concerned with making sure that money that enters the US is lawful. So we have very stringent requirements. We have to show the source of the money from the time it was earned all the way through until investment into the selected EB-5 project. And we also have to show the path of funds. So we have to show the movement of funds through accounts all the way through until the time of investment. The new law also requires that we present tax returns, and if tax returns are not available because perhaps you live in a jurisdiction where they're not required, or they're paid for by your company that employs you, we have to explain that as well. And it is a very fulsome analysis to present a source of funds to the USCIS. We also need to decide what is the project that you're investing in, and Bruce is going to talk about what factors to look at when you choose a project for investment. But of course, most investors want to go for an $800,000 project versus $1,050,000, because at the end of the day, the green card that you get is the same. So when you're selecting a project for immigration, there's a number of factors that you should be looking at. Has this regional center done EB-5 in the past? Do they have experience in the industry? What is their track record of approvals for I-526s, which is the initial EB-5 petition? How many of their investors have been able to remove the conditions? So the EB-5 requires that you invest $800,000 into a new commercial enterprise. That new commercial enterprise is supposed to create 10 jobs per investor. In regional center projects, that happens through indirect employment creation. So usually it's the spending of money that generates, through an economic model, a certain output of jobs. And if a business is not able to meet the objectives of their business plan, if they're delayed for some reason, if they don't secure financing that they were relying on, they may not be able to evidence job creation at the 8 to 9 stage, which could potentially impact a person's immigration. So it's very important to consider that. Okay, so job creation. This is sort of the crux of the EB-5 program. Initially, when the EB-5 program was introduced in 1990 and the regional center program was introduced in 1992, it was a time when we were really trying to bring foreign direct investment to the United States. And this program was conceptualized as a tax as a way for American taxpayers to not pay anything to bring in foreign money into the US and to ensure that it creates jobs. And this really sets aside the US investment program for many of the other overseas investment programs, the Caribbean, the European. We need job creation in the US, and so it has to be met. As I said, it's 10 jobs per investor. And when you invest into a regional center project, I previously mentioned an economic model. Well, the economic model allows a regional center to capture jobs not just at the project itself, but jobs that are generated in the region as impacts through the investment. And so the benefit of that is it's indirect job creation. And the benefit is that you get a lot more jobs than you would if you were just creating jobs directly. So for example, if I invest into a hotel, I'm not looking at just the W-2 employees working at the hotel. I am looking at how much money was spent to construct the hotel, how much money was spent on hard costs and soft costs and to operate the hotel. And I end up with a lot more jobs than just the W-2 employees on site. And so when the program says you have to create 10 jobs per investor, when you're reviewing a project to invest in, it's always good to look for a project that can give you even more jobs per investor. It gives you a cushion in case any are disallowed. And so that is something that I think is very, very important. And if you look on the screen here, we have a beautiful chart created by EB-5AN. They're very skilled with the charts, and I love a good visual. So you can see that you're looking at both direct jobs and indirect jobs if you look at the last column. And that's great because investors get 24 jobs each. And so you're more secure in the EB-5 project meeting the requirements. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Kate. Before we jump to the next slide, could you touch a little bit on the concept of job creation happening, before the investor actually joins the project, and how USCIS rules, apply in a situation where the project's been going on, but the investor's coming in the middle? How does all of that work?
Well, the answer is it's permitted, and it's even permitted for the project to have begun with other financing or bridge financing. This is part of the RIA. It's now part of the law. And the investor can still capture those jobs, because when we look at the money being put into the project, we're not just looking at the EB-5 money going in, we're looking at the totality of the project. And so the project, even if it began earlier, even if it's mid-construction, even if it's nearing the end and we're using EB-5 to replace the bridge financing, we can capture those jobs and allocate them per investor. So, sometimes clients get nervous because they think they won't get credit for it, but it is important to consider it when you're weighing your due diligence, because we've seen other projects that perhaps, have purchased the land and are still waiting to secure other financing or to raise EB-5 to move forward, and it's delayed or it falls through or they're not able to, and the project just doesn't move forward at all. So many investors choose to look at projects that are underway or that have other financing where the EB-5 is taking it out, because they have some assurance that the project is actually going to be completed and the job creation met.
Got it. So from an immigration kind of risk perspective, there's kind of two sides of the equation, right? Like the riskiest would be a project that maybe has only the land where no job creation has happened, because you don't get job credit for purchasing land. So they own the land, but no money's been spent on construction, so there's 0 jobs in the job bank toward the 10 that are needed. Whereas the other side of the equation or spectrum, the kind of lowest risk option is a project that is well advanced, has a lot of jobs already created, ideally more than the 10 that are needed for the investor. And can you do any better than that, or is that that's kind of the best an investor could hope for, is something that's well under construction and it has more than the 10 that are needed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's ideal, right? The program requires that the money is at risk, but it doesn't require that you put money into a risky project, right? As an investor, you have to weigh the immigration benefits with the investment benefits. So we want to make sure that, in many cases, the project is underway, that it is going to move forward, that it is going to be completed, that financing is in place. That's very important, especially now in today's environment.
Exactly. Yeah. Interest rates are up, and a lot of people who thought they could borrow funds, a year or two ago are, having issues because now the number of loan dollars you can get is going to be a lot lower, and operating costs are significantly higher.
Yes.
I think there's one other factor there, just to interrupt for a second, and that is there are a lot of loans that may be out of balance, that they may have had the full financing in place, but because of increases in interest rates or increases in construction costs, they're now out of balance, and the senior lender comes back to the developer and says, we need more equity dollars. It's not always there.
Right.
So we can talk about that more when we get to my part of the slide here, but I thought it was important to sort of put that in place.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Kate, I know you touched on briefly earlier the concept of these set-asides. Maybe we don't have to go through each one in detail, but just give us the concept. What do these set-aside categories do? Why is it kind of unique and better, favorable for new investors now versus, investors from a year or two ago?
Well, the first benefit is that the slate is sort of clean. We have a long backlog for previously filed cases for individuals from certain countries like China and India. Right now, choosing to file in one of these set-aside categories has no backlog. So whereas you may have a Chinese national who previously filed and has been waiting 10 years, they can file all over again in a rural area project, and they're not subject to the retrogression. They just have to wait for the USCIS processing times to get their green card. So that's a huge benefit, and it's really sort of breathed new life into EB-5 for many people. Also, you already know what kind of projects are going to be prioritized and looked at first because they're telling you under the RIA. We want mostly rural project. We're giving them the largest allocation, 20%, followed by 10% for the high unemployment DEA, and 2% for government infrastructure projects. So they're telling you already how they're going to prioritize new applications. And if any of the categories that are set aside don't meet their caps for the first year, it's reallocated the second year to them. So they will have even more spots. So it's very important, and it's been a huge draw for many investors.
Got it. And we'll spend a little more time on that when we get to the visa bulletin slide as well, but just that's really good context. I guess talk to us a little bit about this priority processing for rural projects. What does it mean? What do we know so far, even though it's early? And how does that kind of factor into comparing a rural project versus a non-rural project as the immigration attorney for a potential investor?
So we know during the congressional hearings, when the EB-5 program was suspended and the RIA was being debated in Congress, that there was a huge push by many members of Congress to funnel money to rural projects. They want to make sure that rural areas are receiving foreign dollars, that they're available for development. And so the set-aside category of 20% was born. And as you can see in the RIA itself, it says that we shall prioritize processing of rural applications. So we expect those I-526s will actually be adjudicated faster than others. And certainly those people who were previously in line, who filed under the old EB-5 law, unfortunately, they will also be behind the priority processing of the new applications. So they're really giving attention to them because they want to make sure that the dollars are going to rural areas. We don't know exactly, and this is sort of the million-dollar question that everybody that I do consultations with and meets wants to know is, well, how long exactly is it going to be? We don't know. The program, really was passed last year in March, implemented in May. We had some litigation, so most people started filing applications in August and September of 2022. So I expect that we should be receiving adjudications soon. But to give broad trends on exactly how fast it will be, we don't know exactly.
Got it. Got it. I guess on the concept of priority processing, is this a completely new concept for USCIS, or is this something that they have had in the past, but just not for EB-5? And, kind of looking at where they have had it, like, has it been a material difference versus, categories and visa processes that didn't have it, or, does that even exist?
Yeah, we didn't really have it in other immigration categories. We had something called premium processing, where you pay an extra fee, $2,500, and you get a decision in 2 weeks. And there are certain employment-based immigrant categories, like extraordinary ability aliens, those are the people at the top of your field, multinational managers and executives, who could pay that fee, get a decision in 2 weeks and get a decision on their case. But this is not premium processing, and premium processing is not being introduced for EB-5. Priority processing means there's a line and these people are going to be ahead of the other people, but how quickly, we don't know for sure.
Got it. So what we really know is this is going to be the fastest way to get the green card. How fast, we don't know, but you're going to be in the fast pass lane. And, however long that ends up taking, it will, should be faster than, the other lanes that are open. And so last thing is, for investors who, are now seeing this large retrogression for EB-1, particularly for India, who are saying, oh, well, looks like that door is closing. Now, I really need to get serious about EB-5. What are the next steps for someone like that, if they wanted to explore doing an EB-5 application with you and your team? How long is it going to take? What documents do they need? How long before they can apply and get that EAD?
So it typically takes us like 2 to 3 weeks to put together an investor petition, as long as they get us all of the required documents. There's going to be sort of 2 sets of documents that we need. For the adjustment, we're going to need biographic documents, birth certificates, marriage certificates, divorce certificates, employment history, educational history. You have to get a medical. For the EB-5, we need the source of funds document. So if you're an H-1B and you've been working in the US and your source is your salary, then we're going to need information about your salary and your tax returns. If the source of funds comes from overseas, the beauty of EB-5 is it's very flexible what your source can be, and it can be a combination of sources. So it can be a sale of real estate, it could be a sale of stock, it could be divorce, money you got awarded in a divorce, it can be salary, it can be a gift from parents. I even had somebody I did an EB-5 for who was a professional poker player and used his winnings. So it can be anything as long as we can document it and it's lawful. And we work with investors. They can contact us by emailing for a consultation to, tailor the list of documents that we need from them in order to file a successful EB-5 petition.
Yep, exactly. So Kate, sorry I got cut off there. On the topic of guarantees, obviously there's the at-risk requirement. How does that link together with these guarantees that are very common? I know this is a confusing topic. Funds have to be invested, but there can be a guarantee. How does that all kind of make sense and is allowed?
So funds have to be at risk of loss, right? That's what the law says. But, that doesn't mean there can't be things like a completion guarantee, or, if the investment application, the 526, is denied, that you can't have a developer offer or a regional center that's working with a certain project offer to guarantee the return of funds in case of denial. What you can't guarantee is that 100% you will get your investment back. You know, it's just, as you said before, treated like any other business investment. There's no guarantees. And we've seen lots of funky structures where people come to us and, you know, they have the great idea that they're building a condo project, and, you know, they want to say, if you invest the EB-5, you get either a discount or you get a condo. Immigration, you know, looks at those types of arrangements as a sort of guarantee, because you're getting something that has the value of the investment. So it's very important to work with counsel to evaluate these types of arrangements and make sure, if you see the word guarantee, that is structured in a way that is permissible under the EB-5 requirements. I think from an immigration perspective, track record is important. The RIA, we didn't get into it, but has a lot of new requirements with respect to compliance and making sure that the regional center is in good standing, making sure that the job creating entity and new commercial enterprise are in good standing. And also for past projects, they're a good indicator of how future projects are going to do on the immigration side. Who are they working with? How many times have they done this? Have they done it successfully? These are all super important questions that nobody should shy away from asking.